Welcome to Restless. I'm Father Joseph Gill, priest of the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut. You join Matt and Joe on this lovely day as we speak about edifying things of the Spirit. In fact, show us your rosary, because now that we're on YouTube, you can see
that's it.
This rosary is
It's one of those
honestly paracord, like rugged rosaries.
Oh yeah. Well, I googled indestructible rosary, and this is what popped up.
So as Padre Pio said, the rosary was his weapon, but I think he meant that metaphorically.
Yeah.
I think that could be literally used as a weapon to physically injure someone.
Yeah. You could draw blood.
Yeah.
This is actually a third-class relic of Padre Pio.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Nice. Which Padre Pio is right behind us.
Yeah.
Well, his picture, not himself.
That's true.
Maybe spiritually he's here.
Hopefully. Yeah, and many other saints as well. I went to a men's conference, and they had like 40 first-class relics.
Awesome.
So,
that's cool.
There's an argument to be made as to whether or not you can even make a third-class relic of one item with many different saints. I happen to think you can.
I mean, it's more of a spiritual reality. It's not just.
Yeah, I mean, grace is a common good as opposed to a private good. So, it's not like a piece of cake.
Right.
When you eat it, it's gone. But with grace, it's not like God's, infinite.
Right. Exactly. Anyway.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with what we're going to talk about.
But speaking of Padre Pio, actually, Padre Pio is a good segue because Padre Pio was certainly one of the most well-beloved saints, but he had a rough edge sometimes, right? He could be impatient. He could be really sharp with his tongue, kind of a sharp wit. And that's one of the things that in seminary, I know they try to kind of shave off perhaps those rough edges that all of us have, And back in was it late 90s or must have been late 90s, early 90s, that Pope John Paul II put out a great document about priestly formation called Pastoris Daba Vobis.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Joe has heard it ad nauseum in his couple of years in seminary. They talk about it nonstop because it's really very insightful. And one of the great insights that they had is they talked about the 4 pillars of formation.
Right.
So saying when a person's trying to become a priest, there's 4 different elements they work on. They work on, of course, the pastoral, how you preach, how you minister to the sick, and this and that. They talk about the intellectual, that's the theological background, the spiritual, how to pray. But John Paul II said the cornerstone, the most important of all the other ones, is surprising. It's the human formation. Because as he puts in it, he says, the priest must form his personality to be a bridge, not an obstacle to a person encountering Christ. And that's not just true for priests and religious. It's true for every Christian, especially if we're called to evangelize, but just to be a good human being. And I was reading an interesting article the other day about how more and more Gen Z are bringing their parents to job interviews.
Whoa.
Kind of threw me
Does
for a loop.
More and more mean like from 2 to 6 a year?
They're up to like 20%.
Wow.
Like 20. That from some.
Bring their parents.
Bring their parents.
I'm buying that.
I mean, maybe I'm getting the statistics wrong, but they're noticing it's a trend that's it's definitely creeping upward. And a lot of they were also talking about some of the other trends in interviewing. They're saying a lot of Gen Z doesn't know how to make eye contact, or to answer questions, or even to show up on time.
Right.
Stuff that doesn't, you could be the most talented human being in the world, but you're not going to get the job if you're,
late.
if you're a slob, you haven't shaved today, or something like that.
Yeah.
But so
I didn't
I'm looking at these guys over here.
To be fair, it's my second day off, so I'm essentially Sunday afternoon right now to me. So.
That's fair. Yeah. But so I mean, these human formation issues are very real issues, and they're issues for Christians too. In that,
we are humans.
We are humans. And what was that great dictum of St. Thomas Aquinas? Grace builds on nature.
Yeah.
Right. If we want to be a saint is somebody not only who of course is spiritually attuned, but also is fully human. St. Irenaeus, the glory of God is man fully alive, And so to be fully human is to be a saint. So, first of all, what do you see in terms of what are some of the needs that young adults have in terms of human formation nowadays? And, how do they learn it? Because a lot of times we don't get it from our family of origin. What are some of the lacks that perhaps we need to look at in terms of just being human?
Yeah, I think that there is a tendency to really be hesitant to impose one's own opinions on other people's behavior, and I think that leads to this sort of overly permissive attitude. So, I mean, things like knowing how to dress to an occasion, that's an important skill. Being able to sort of anticipate that, being able to show up on time, and knowing what on time means for an event, like knowing that if you're showing up to a grad party that starts at 5, maybe 5 o'clock is actually not the right time to show up. Maybe like 5:30 is the right time to show up because people will be nervous. Whereas like dinner at a family's house at 6 o'clock is like sort of the latest you should probably show up. So that there's being able to sort of intuit those things.
Yeah, some social skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that really is what it boils down to. I mean, I'm sort of surprised in seminary by some things that, and I will concede at the front that I maybe have a higher standard for behavior than maybe I should. I don't know, but I mean, things in terms of just talking really loudly at inappropriate times, like the middle of the night, or
courtesy,
entering a room where people are probably having a conversation, either already talking loudly to the people in the room or on speaker on your phone or something like that. Just these are things that I personally view as like severely antisocial behavior, because they all speak, in my opinion, to a view which is, well, here's the universe and here am I at the center of it, and so therefore no one's talking because I'm not in the room. So what could they possibly be saying? So here I come, I'll start talking now because clearly you're all waiting with bated breath. You know what I mean? So I think that our behavior communicates things to people. When someone walks through like an otherwise quiet hallway talking on the speaker, what they're communicating to me is like, well, my ease matters more than your peace, right? I think that we communicate a lot through these human things, a lot more than we realize, I think.
That idea of narcissism, I think, is pretty important, because that's, I mean, it's been the struggle of human history since the beginning, but I do think there's a unique challenge nowadays with narcissism, in part because a lot of people don't grow up with a lot of siblings. I mean, when you grow up with
you're forced
a bunch of siblings. I mean, I'm the oldest of 5, and that's, that was a huge family. I didn't know too many other families that were that large, and you're forced to realize you're not the center of the universe. But
you can't be.
You can't be. Yeah, exactly. So
there's a phrase that I heard. I don't remember where I heard it. So but to be clear, I'm not taking credit for it. That what is it?
Must have made a deep impact in you.
Yeah. The word's escaping me. Oh, manners. That's hilarious. Manners is the precursor to charity.
Huh.
And I think that the reason that it actually did have a bit of an impact on me is because I don't consider myself I don't consider myself impolite, but I don't think that I ever put in a true and genuine active effort in as a teenager to like grow in manners. And in peace, that's probably because of where I went to school, not meaning that my school encouraged me to be rude.
I said you went to a Catholic school, so you had a uniform and.
Yeah, but like I guess what I mean is like you teach at Kung, and Kung is a classical education school, and there is a clear and intentional. There was an intentional decision. Yeah, but I mean like kids get written up if their belt's not on.
Yeah.
And if your tie is too loose, like someone's gonna bring it up, and that and dress is a form of manners, maybe visibly, and yeah.
But interestingly enough, we found at that school that, I mean, I think it was when you were teaching there that we actually had to institute a class in 8th grade called decorum.
There you go.
Which was really interesting, and it's a lot of stuff that you're just not taught. Like when you're at a formal dinner, which fork do you use?
Yeah, I don't know, actually.
You don't.
I mean, I know there's a cake fork and a.
From the outside in,
right? Yeah.
From the outside in, yeah.
Fun fact: you know how you determine where your bread plate is and where your drink is? It's the canonical digits.
B and D, right? Yeah.
So that's exciting.
B and D.
The same.
I'm still doing right and left with my L's on my fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people would look at that and be like, "Well, that's so, pointless, right? Like, why would you need to really know about fork?" But it's not pointless because it shows respect to the people that you're with.
Not just that, but it puts everybody, including yourself, at ease. Like this is kind of a deep cut, but some people may be familiar with William F. Buckley, who was founder of National Review, very important, sort of conservative and Catholic intellectual, and
who's also from Connecticut, by the way.
Yes, that's
from
right.
Reading, Connecticut, from our diocese.
That's right. Yeah. As all good people are, and so
all good people.
That's right. And so I've heard it said about him that if you define manners as the ability to set people at ease, that he had the best manners. And it was said, he was a very wealthy man. He'd throw these kind of elaborate parties, and he was very well connected. And this person said about him, you could be anybody, a waiter, an intern, whoever it was. If you were speaking to him, you were speaking to him. And so you were the only person in the room. You got his undivided attention. It was obvious from his body language. And so I think that's somebody who is so integrated the idea of manners into his life that it's second nature, and he emanates it. I think these other things what we're trying to do is train ourselves to control externals such that we project to other people how we mean to treat them. And so if someone invites you to a wedding and you show up in jeans and a button-down shirt that's like not tucked in and sneakers, well, what you're communicating to me is this isn't that important to me, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that just is what it is, because we're not spirits floating around.
Right.
We're embodied, creatures.
Yes.
So it matters a great deal. It matters a great deal.
And I'll tell you, I mean, I am at this point. I'm in my parish. I'm actually working very hard on appropriate dress for mass, and I'm getting such a pushback because the whole idea is, oh, well, God loves you no matter what you do,
Right,
and
it's-
come as you are, and this and that. But I totally agree with you, and I'm getting so much flack from my own parishioners about why do we need to do this? But you're absolutely right. It shows
Yes.
that we know who we're going to see, and if the mass really is the wedding feast of the Lamb,
Right.
you dress as if you're going to a wedding feast.
Amen. Amen. And it's interesting because I haven't thought of giving undivided attention as an aspect of manners before. But I love that, because if people talk about JP2, right? What do they always say? They would always say something like, well, if you met him, you were the only person in the room to him.
Yeah.
And that particular characteristic is always spoken about in a manner as if it's Christ-like. That intentional focus is a characteristic of the Lord. Now, as someone
I
who
would say
has a
it's-
hard time keeping, their attention span.
I would say it's exceptionally difficult. I can't say as a
Yeah.
priest that I can
But
do
think
that
of, think
well.
of the times in the gospel where it says something like, Jesus looked at him and seeing him said, or something like that. Or do you
Right.
see this man? Like, it actually
Yeah.
does seem to matter to our Lord that you not just kind of notice someone and then, react to their presence, but see them,
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
I still struggle with that a lot. But
Oh, yeah, me too. But,
Well,
yeah.
but-
Because,
but
in
that
part
also-
because I'm getting a flood of 800 people after a Sunday mass,
right.
and I'm like, how can I give? I can't fragment my attention.
No. But
for
that's
800 people,
different from sort of sitting down from somebody right at lunch and doing this. All right, well, I'm really glad that we're having lunch together, right? It's like with this, what
bringing
I've
out
just
the
done
phone.
is I've just
for those who are
communicated
listening
to
on
you,
radio.
you do not have my undivided attention, right? So,
Right.
whereas if you keep your phone in your pocket and you make eye contact and you're not doing other things, like we all get distracted, like that, that
Yeah.
happens. But I again, like,
That's
it
true. And that's
matters.
a bare minimum. Is definitely not intentionally bringing in distractions into that relationship.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up technology, because it's we live in this such a deeply technological culture, whereby we have recourse to these devices like 24/7.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about, I guess we're talking about manners, but what was the original pitch for the episode? What were we really going to talk
Human
about?
formation.
Human formation,
which
right?
is
Like,
very much
essential part of
manners.
it.
Yeah.
Right, and absolutely, right? But if you're weighing the positives versus the negatives, right? Like, how much of a positive impact is technology having on you, and how much of a negative impact is it having on you? It should I'm not saying that right now we should decide for the world whether or not iPhones exist,
Well,
because they exist already and we
most
can't
of
change
us are
it.
listening to this via technology.
Right. So there's like
Which we're really glad
clearly,
you're doing, by the way.
yes, and you
Please
should
continue to
like
do
and
so. Yeah,
subscribe.
that's right, yeah.
And comment
Do
below.
so as often as possible.
Yeah, share it with as many people as
That's
you
right.
know.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
Right, so there's obviously the benefits of technology, but it feels like culturally we're at a point where we're recognizing that there is a huge drawback,
Yeah.
and people are actively. This is a pitch for something called the Wise Phone, which is something that I wish I had, but I don't, because I don't have that strong of a. I'm not a strong decision maker. I'm kidding. I'm not. But I wish that I had something like a Wise Phone, whereby my telephone was only a telephone. Actually, you can't even get an email on that
Mhm.
device.
Same with me.
and-
I have the Gab phone.
Right,
which is,
right. And so it
similar.
removes all of these distractions, which allows you to actually cultivate manners, which is a huge part of human formation.
Yeah, but I do think that it's. I don't just think it is in fact the case that it's possible to cultivate manners even despite those distractions.
Sure.
And I do actually think that we are coming to a greater awareness of just how rude it is to text while you're talking to somebody or something like that. So I do think that this is technology that came on the world pretty quickly, and I think that we're kind of catching up a little bit.
Mhm.
And I think that one of the ways that this sort of happens in just human formation in general is through like these institutions that are formative. Like I know I've had certain institutions that I've been a part of in my life that have really shaped the way I act as a person. I'm curious, maybe that's been your experience, and maybe that's part of the problem is that we have fewer of these sort of mediating institutions that inculcate these manners and these human virtues in people.
I would make an argument that one of those institutions, like it or not, is YouTube. So I guess that's why I'm proposing that,
You said that's an
removing
institution.
some of
Interesting.
these devices. Okay, I mean, I realize that it doesn't fall under the category of institution insofar as, I mean, I guess they have a building, but like you don't go
Yeah,
to
it's
that
also not what-
building.
not
We were
what
thinking
it
know,
like
means.
schools.
So
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
but how many people are receiving their, like it or not,
formation.
primary education? You
Yeah.
know, because like in Familiaris Consortia, right? Like JP2 talks about how the parents are the primary educators of their children, but he doesn't really mean that in terms of like arithmetic. You know,
Right.
like he's talking
Probably
about
formators. Really.
right, human formation.
Yeah, but I think that
Um,
needs to be reinforced by other things. I mean, I think a thick society,
Mhm.
has lots of institutions in it where the thing your dad just told you to do, which you ignored because you're 12 and you know
Mm.
better than him. You're now confronted with multiple people who are telling you the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important.
When I was in high school, my father knows this. My high school had a really big ROTC program.
Mhm.
I remember when it started, my commander told the parents at the parents-teacher conference, like, your kids are gonna come home and say things like, "Well, commander told me X, Y, or Z," and you're gonna be like, "I just told you that last week." And he's like, "Yeah, but the point is like we're
Right.
reinforcing it." And that was formative experience. I mean, 15 minutes early was like was hammered into us as a hard and fast rule for things. Like
Right.
you don't show up to things late. We had lessons on how to shine our shoes.
Mm.
When it came time to wear our dress uniforms,
Mm.
guys who didn't know how to tie ties were taught how to tie ties by each other.
Right.
We
Yeah.
were taught things very simple, like if you walk across stage to accept an award, grab the award with your left hand, shake with your right hand, eye contact.
Right.
And it sounds like, well, that's just trivial, or you should know that anyway, and fine. But when I say that everybody's put at ease by inculcation manners, I mean the person, the subject too. In other words,
Mhm.
I'm more at ease, and therefore I can put other people at ease by my own sort of peace if I have really imbibed these rules. I just act. I don't have to think like, what should I be doing? Where should I be standing? Who should I be talking to? I can just,
Yeah.
I
Where
can
do my
just
hands
be.
go?
Right, because I can
Right.
I mean, this is actually very similar to what true chastity is, right? Which is I can be so integrated into the rules of norms of society that I can just be. I can just be free. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of young people, a lot of young adult Catholics really kind of flock to good priests in their communities is because they're integrated people who've actually had some formation.
Yeah.
And they're just on a human level, they're just solid, and
And to be honest, I think that's why many young adult Catholics are flocking to the traditional forms, because it provides a structure.
Right. Yeah.
Of certain, like, this is clearly right, this is clearly wrong. This is, I mean, unlike the very ambiguous teachings that we used to get, that I've certainly received growing up from my slightly left-leaning pastors
Yeah.
and whatnot.
Fair enough.
But I like what you said, because I think following the rules of manners is not enough until it is integrated. And I think that's really the question of human formation, is not just do this, but is this coming from a place where you know who you are and you can do this with confidence? That's I think why a lot of young adults can't look someone else in the eye, is that they don't have confidence in themselves. They don't they don't know who they are. They're not comfortable in their own skin. And I think how do we grow in that? I think one element that comes to my mind is facing challenging things, doing challenging things.
Mhm.
Facing challenge, not being afraid to be uncomfortable, do difficult
Yeah.
things, stretch yourself. And because once you could say, oh wow, I've done this, this, and this, and it was really hard and I conquered it, then you can have more self-confidence. You'd be like, all right, now I know a lot more about who I am. And
Yeah. There was an episode of The Tangent where Dr. Pekuliuk, he's a professor of ethics at Catholic University of America. He began that episode by saying, I teach ethics, which is ironic because I don't believe that ethics can be taught. And then he proposed that ethics has to be, I guess, assimilated. Yeah, it has to be assimilated to yourself, right? By experience. That's the only way. And then the example he gave was Teddy Roosevelt when he wanted to increase in, I believe it was courage, he took up mountain climbing.
Right.
I was like, man, I have never climbed a mountain.
Because if you know Teddy Roosevelt's story, he was raised basically like a girl. His
Really?
mom used to dress him in dresses.
No way.
As a little boy.
I did not know that.
I guess she wanted a girl or something. And he recognized that that was a flaw in himself. And so he not only did mountain climbing, he started big game hunting.
Really?
Started camping in the West.
How about
Not
that?
just because of the enjoyment, but because he knew he needed that for his own formation.
Right.
And that's something that I think young adult Catholics and any young adult can do,
Absolutely.
is like look at the lacks in your own formation
Yeah.
and find ways to address it.
Or the flaws, right? So like if you are someone who I love that you brought up chastity before, because like what's one of the greatest epidemics in our culture? It's pornography. So I mean, you want to talk about disintegration, having your essentially, I guess, sexual education, having the source of that be porn.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh, you want to talk about a detraction on your self-integration.
And even if you can't, if you're currently enslaved into it, you can still get to the root of it by doing difficult things, right?
Yes,
by
yes.
fasting, by
Right.
praying when you don't want to, making that
Right.
daily holy hour, whatever it is
Right.
that you can start the formation yourself. Don't need
Yeah.
to wait for someone else. So I think really for me, like if I had to give advice to parents, I'd say the best thing is don't shield your kid from hardship. Guide them through it, but don't shield them from it. And that's why I see a lot of parents don't require the kids to do chores or face any difficulties at school.
I think another way that parents could help, which is to say another way that parents contribute to the problem,
That's right.
just being honest, is shielding, not just shielding your kids from hardship, but shielding your kids from correction.
Mm.
So you hear a lot from teachers, especially older teachers. At one point I could, if I called home, it was a big deal because the parents would come down on the kids. Whereas now if I call home, it's a big deal because the parents come down on me.
Absolutely.
When I taught martial arts, we did a fair amount of correcting of kids, and it wasn't just about form. There was a certain kind of code of respect that was expected, and we'd call people out on it. And every once in a while, you would get parents who couldn't abide any criticism of their child.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get it, like you love your kid, that's fine.
Yeah.
But not only is it fine, but it's good. But just to be clear,
You should
Yeah.
love your child, yes.
but
But love doesn't
right,
gloss
oh,
over
no.
the,
right, but
the
that doesn't mean
issues.
that if I am pointing out to you, not just he was a little disrespectful to me or something like that, but he's doing something that's actually dangerous and it's against our rules, and he knows it's against the rules. It's high enough rank to know better. You shouldn't be trying to make excuses for him. You should be saying, "Thank you for pointing this out to me. I'm going to now talk to him or talk to her," or something like that. And I think that you, as a parent, you need to be able to hear criticism of your children and let them be corrected, because then a 12-year-old who can't be told don't throw elbows at another student in sparring when it's illegal and dangerous won't be able to be told by their teachers that they need to show up to class on time, by their bosses that they need to get their work done on time, by their spouses that they need to do like all these things. It starts when you're young, and if you can't hear
Right.
if you can't, we all know people like this in our life. If you can't hear any criticism, you're totally unformable.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think some parents defend their kid because they feel like criticism of their kid is criticism of them and criticism of their parenting style.
Sometimes it is.
I mean, it is.
Yeah, but
very well, maybe.
not always. I mean,
No.
parents should be detached enough to say, yeah, you know what, this kid is a little, has this challenge and is not reflecting on me. It's just this kid's challenge.
That speaks
Yeah,
to
they're an
another
individual.
failure in human formation, though, is the inability to say, an inability to be confident enough in yourself. I told my kid not to do that, and I'm glad you brought it to my attention, because this doesn't threaten me at all, because I'm confident enough that I'm doing a good enough job, and I can hear criticism myself even. Right?
Yeah.
Like it's easy to kind of push the problem on the kids, but I mean, we think millennial just means young person. It doesn't mean that, actually. The millennials are the ones who are the parents of the kids we're actually criticizing right
I
now,
know,
right?
millennials, I'm a millennial. I'm 40. So,
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
yeah, the millennials.
I'm Gen Z, obviously, because I'm an actual young adult, but
So is Matt.
Yeah, I don't know where the cutoff is, so I just wasn't gonna.
I'm a very young Gen Z. Yeah. How old are you?
I'm 26.
Oh, okay, you're only a year older than I am. You're probably Gen Z too.
Okay, yeah. There
Congratulations.
you go. There you go. Old
well,
man.
that
Old man in the
sucks.
room.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how can the church help with this, with
Mm.
the formation, the human formation?
I'm in several elements. Obviously, there's the spiritual component, right? But I was thinking about integration on the way here. And so this is going to be a little bit of a tangent, but I'm going to take the long
It's your
route.
second time referencing your other podcast.
I know.
Is that
I didn't-
outrageous?
Come on, man.
I actually, I've
Outrageous.
I've actively tried.
Tangents
to
are
prevent
not
myself,
welcome here.
I know, to prevent myself from using that phrase too.
It's all right.
Misallocation
Talk
of time and resources.
Yeah.
We love you anyway.
You should listen to it. No, I'm kidding.
He is kidding, by the way. You shouldn't listen to it.
But right, if you look in the Old Testament, one of the kinds of sacrifices made at the temple was a Holocaust, like a full burnt offering, where that's a type of Christ's offering on the cross, right? Which is he offered himself in full to the end. And I think there's a lesson in there about integration, which is like essentially complete surrender in there, and therefore God filling you completely, right? Fully orienting you towards himself. Simplicity.
Yeah.
And so how does the church help with that? Well, the church helps with that catechetically. And the church helps with that because it is the organ of salvation whereby you receive a sacrament of healing and penance and in confession, And so there's different avenues you can go through that. And I think it depends on the person, right? Like, what are you personally in need of right now?
Yeah.
And so I guess if I were to make it personal, then like in different stages of my life, well, there was certainly a period where, I was, I don't know the stage of, what is it? There's 3 stages of the purgative way and the, what I'm talking about?
Yeah, illuminative way and a unitive way.
Yeah, right. And so when in the purgative way, when that was the stage of life I was in, I guess, it's like, well, you know what? The church really offered me confession like every 4 to 5 days, and like I needed it, so like,
sure,
so like that was how the church helped me then,
yeah.
Whereas now I'm probably in that stage where like I really benefit from studying theology.
Are you in the unitive stage?
I sincerely doubt it.
Your will is united to Christ so intimately that
man, I'm aiming for it.
I cannot tell the difference.
He's actually trilocating right now. You can't tell because we're only here, but
yeah.
He's
I'm
also
actually
home and he's also at the gas station. It's really
and I'm
remarkable.
recording an episode of The Tangent with Father Sam.
Yeah. No, that's 3. Count them, people. That's 3.
That's right.
Right, but so like there's manifold ways is what I'm trying to get across. So
I'll say one thing the church needs to do, and this is something that I find challenging, and I think it's just a mental shift that our world and our church needs to shift, is we're so afraid of being disliked that to offer correction is, we don't want to ever do that, right? Like in this whole the debacle, but the challenge of trying to help my parishioners become more reverently dressed.
Sure.
I've had people say to me, well, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go to a different church where I can continue to dress as I wish and not be, so we often feel that way, I think, especially, teaching religious education or anything, try to give some formation to the kid.
Yeah.
And we're so afraid that someone's going to leave.
Right.
So nobody wants to actually offer the formation because formation is difficult.
Yeah.
It's easier just
you're being molded.
To live and let live. And like, if you want to play 8 hours of video games a day, go ahead and do that, right? That's easier just to say that rather than to say, well, I actually have some bad news for you. You really need to do X, Y, and Z to become a good human being. And I think in part, we've all interiorized, especially in America, I think the idea that that there's no such, that if we are criticized, we are not loved.
Mm-hmm.
We've interiorized that idea, and that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to show that it's not true by continuing to love the people that we're offering criticism to in a good way.
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. I also think that there can be a tendency to over spiritualize some things. By which I mean that, like I said before, priests are almost the only people in society at this point who receive, at least in theory, like, real sort of intentional formation in all the 4 areas that you mentioned, including the human. So most adults aren't going to be sat down by a slightly older adult in some cases and told, you need to show up more on time, you need to do this, you need to do that. And so, and not to mention the fact that priests also receive, pretty rigorous like philosophical training. And so I think sometimes priests should not only run to the spiritual dimension of things, but should also lean on the fact they actually have received pretty solid human formation in most cases, informed by this philosophical education, and be willing to share that with their parishioners. Not every talk has to be some sort of high theological concept. I mean, something, I just did this. Like, I gave a talk to a youth group about friendship. Friendship, I would argue, is, among other things, a human thing.
Definitely.
It's also
and one that's difficult in today's society.
Right, and it's also like multiple sections in Sirach on it. There's all sorts of ways that the scriptures inform this, so it's actually essential. And like I said before, grace builds on nature, so you can't just expect to build this like sort of beautiful cathedral of grace on top of the sand of someone's sort of human existence, right? Like there needs to be an actual solid human foundation by human formation to then build anything spiritual on top of. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I know Lauren did a couple of years, maybe last year, she did a series with her church on like how to date, like very basic.
Right.
Like,
yes.
The dating.
It was last summer.
Yeah, and it's something so simple. You think like, oh, you just know it, but you don't really know it, right? I mean, how do you get trained to date and to talk to a girl? I mean, it's like.
Right,
but usually that's what the parents' role is. The parents should sit down with their 15-year-old son and be like, all right, here's how you take a girl on a date.
That's true, but again, in times past, there were also other institutions that helped the family.
Right.
That's what Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts are, right? At least in part.
I didn't learn how to date in Boy Scouts, but.
Well, sure. I mean, certainly you're not going to learn that in Boy Scouts.
In today's world, you could because it's co-ed.
Yeah. But I mean, but also just being on a sports team should teach you how to show up on time and take care of your stuff and
Yeah.
Right.
study martial arts and dancing or whatever it is, ROTC, whatever it is. These things should be formative, and so I think the church is a primary part of this constellation that society should have. And to the extent that the other stars in the constellation are kind of falling away, the church, I think, if she wants to have any success in these people, needs to step in and really offer some serious human formation. Because again, you can't build a castle on nothing, right? So you can't build something on people who are train wrecks, frankly. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who
Right.
can't show up
Yeah.
on time and can't follow through on things and can't understand what one social situation and how it differs from another and can't speak correctly. And all these things really do matter.
They really do. They really do. And we have to challenge ourselves to grow in those areas and not become complacent and just be like, well, this is who I am.
Yeah.
Like, no.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you're
Then
You're called to be the
then
best.
then be
Change.
better.
you're called to be the best version of yourself.
Seriously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So here's my challenge for you as we've run out of time. My challenge is to consider just in your own life, perhaps maybe an element of human formation, whether it is manners, whether it is dependability, whether it is that interpersonal paying attention to the other person, the listening skills, whatever it is that's just really a basic human skill that perhaps we lack. Because I think all of us fall short in that. There's no, other than Jesus Christ, there's no perfectly formed human out there. But take the steps necessary to develop yourself in human formation, because we don't have to wait for someone to give that formation to us. We can do it by challenging ourselves to do things, by educating ourselves on the necessity and how to go about just simply living a good human life. Because again, the glory of God is man fully alive, and God wants you to be alive in every aspect, relationally, intellectually, and certainly in the way in which we live in civil society and the confidence and the peace that we have within our own hearts. So you can find us on Veritas Catholic Network, 1350 AM, 103.9 FM, also on YouTube and lots of other great platforms. So stay tuned for the next episode coming up next week.